Welcome to Noetica Channel, peace be upon you. Esteemed ones, you restless minds yearning to explore the depths of knowledge. Imagine with me for a moment that we are not in a transient lecture hall, but we are now witnessing the greatest intellectual trial that Islamic history has ever seen throughout its ages. In the front row, we see the defendants, the great masters of philosophy. Al-Farabi, known as the second teacher, Ibn Sina, the chief sheikh, and Ibn Rushd, the commentator of the great Aristotle. And on the prosecution bench stands a public prosecutor not coming from a government office, but driven by a deep fear for the essence of religion. He is the proof of Islam, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. As for the judge in this hall, it is history itself, and the jurors are none other than you, students, the generation of today and the men of tomorrow. It is not a trial of individuals, but rather a trial of the mind itself. Is it a friend or an enemy? Is it a servant to the text or a master over it? Here, I pose to you the first question that touches your souls. Do we believe and then use our minds to justify what we believe? Or do we reason in order to ultimately arrive at belief? Does the mind have absolute authority in the presence of faith? Let's briefly return in time to Baghdad in its 4th century, where it was teeming with knowledge and scholars. After the great translation movement at the House of Wisdom, the books of Aristotle and Plato entered, and the Muslim philosophers did not settle for merely translating them. They developed them to become Islamic philosophy, with concepts that sparked debate. Ibn Sina, for example, adopted the concept of emanation. Imagine a spring overflowing with water without interruption. This is how he viewed the world emanating from God since eternity, not as a temporal, intentional act like we understand the construction of a house, but as light emanating from the sun by nature. He would say that the world is ancient, meaning it has emanated from God since eternity. Here, a fundamental question arises. If the world is eternal with God, what is the difference between the creator and the created? Can we call God a creator if his creation is involuntary rather than voluntary? Is it fitting for the majesty of divinity that the world flows from it just as heat flows from fire without intention or will? Al-Ghazali identified 20 issues, declaring 3 of them as heretical, which are the eternity of the world, God's knowledge of universals without particulars, and the denial of the resurrection of bodies. But pause with me for a moment. Do humans, even the scholars among them, have the right to issue certificates of heresy based on theoretical interpretations? Was al-Ghazali defending God, or was he restricting the freedom of thought out of fear of misguidance? After a century of silence, and from the radiant Cordoba, Ibn Rushd rose to respond. His view was that philosophy and religion are twin infants from the breast of truth. He authored The Incoherence of the Incoherence to prove that the contradictions of al-Ghazali stem from his misunderstanding of Aristotle. He divided people into ranks, stating, "Not everyone is prepared to understand rational proof. For the general public, there is the apparent text, and for the elite, there is its hidden meaning and interpretation." He expressed his immortal phrase, "Truth does not contradict truth, but rather agrees with it and testifies to it." Here we ask, is this division of humanity into a philosophical elite and a simple general public a form of intellectual arrogance? Or is it a tangible reality that we see in every science and knowledge? And if the text has layers, who determines the correct interpretation? Let's dive into the deepest points of contention, which is the issue of causality. Imagine a fire touching cotton. Al-Ghazali says, there is no necessary relationship between them. It is God who creates the burning upon contact. An example of this is that if a blind person opens their eyes and sees light after the sun rises, they might think that opening their eyes is the cause of the light, while the true cause is the sun. Thus, fire does not burn by its nature. Rather, it is an inanimate object with no action of its own, and God is capable of preventing this habit, as he did with our master Ibrahim. Here, Ibn Rushd cries out, "This is a sophistry that undermines knowledge." He says, if we strip things of their natures, we strip them of their identities. If fire does not always burn, then the word fire has no meaning. And ask yourselves, does our belief in miracles require us to negate the laws of nature? Is the enforcement of these laws the greatest miracle that indicates the Creator? Which is more awe-inspiring? A God who intervenes every moment to create combustion, or a God who designed a well-ordered universe that operates under a marvelous system without disruption? Then we move on to God's knowledge of particulars. Al-Ghazali says, God knows the number of grains of sand and the beats of hearts in their moment. Ibn Rushd responds, yes, God knows them, but not as we know them. We know things because they exist, whereas for God, things exist because he knows them. His knowledge is a cause for existence, not a result of it. And here is a question that opens the door to contemplation. Does God's knowledge of the details of our actions mean that we are compelled and not free? If God has eternally known what I will do tomorrow, am I truly free? Ibn Rushd sought the answer in the idea that God's knowledge is universal and transcends time. Thus, it does not constrain human freedom, but rather encompasses it. In the end, who won this epic battle? If we look to our Islamic East, al-Ghazali won. Sufism and the science of theology prevailed, while philosophy receded to the point of nearly extinguishing its flame. But, oh, the great irony! Ibn Rushd is the one who triumphed in the West. When his books were translated into Latin, Europe was divided, and Latin Averroism became the driving force behind a scientific revolution. Ibn Rushd paved the way for Thomas Aquinas to reconcile reason and religion, just as he paved the way for scholars like Galileo to seek natural causes without fear. And here we pose the bitter question: why did we reject Ibn Rushd and burn his books, while others embraced him and built their civilization upon him? Was the fault in his thought or in our environment that could not tolerate dissent? Oh, dear students, this story is not for entertainment, but it is a mirror of our reality. Today, we are caught between two currents, one that leans towards stagnation and fears every new thing under the pretext of protecting religion, and another that is dazzled by dry material science and disconnects from its spiritual roots. Do you not see that our nation today needs the heart of Al Ghazali in his faith, certainty, and spiritual experience that gives life meaning, and the mind of Ibn Rushd in his reasoning, scientific rigor, and respect for causes? Can a civilization be built with a mind without a heart, or with a heart that is hostile to the mind? Building the future cannot be achieved by burying the mind or marginalizing the heart, but by weaving a strong bridge between them. The trial in the records of history has ended, but it now begins in your minds. So, what is your position? Will you be a generation that reads the written book of God, the Quran, and his observable book, the universe, with one eye? And how will you build bridges of knowledge in your souls for a new renaissance that combines the revelation of heaven and the light of evidence? The final word has become yours. So what will you do? Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. Welcome to Noetica Channel.